Hi, Bethany.
Hi.
I am so excited because today we have Bethany, who is the CEO and owner of Bethany Works, a strategic brand and website design studio that specializes in building psychology-backed brands that leaves an impact and builds a legacy. And not only that, but she is one of my long-term clients. We've been working together for over 2 years now. You started off doing intensives with me. Now you're in my Limitless mastermind. And today's conversation is going to be a bit of a heavy one. I'm not going to lie,
hmm
but working with you for over the past 2 years and seeing you develop unwavering faith in yourself, I think is a really good conversation to have because a lot of times, like when I started working with you, obviously I didn't know your what you went through as a child. And I remember when I even asked you originally, like when I finally did find out, which was probably like a year into working together, that you
Yes,
finally
yes.
told me. I was like, oh, well, this makes sense now, right? So but so it's really about, we're gonna get into Bethany's story about trauma, on healing, like healing the past and really overcoming mindset shifts into building a super successful multi six figure business as a service provider. Oh, like owning that you're a CEO, owning that you're a founder, owning that you deserve everything you want, and how you've kind of had to battle a lot to get here. So I want to start off by reading an excerpt from Bethany recently did an Instagram post. If you don't follow her, she's at Bethany Works Design, where she had a meet the founder story. And she said, so here's the nitty gritty truth. The truth about my story is that I grew up in a tumultuous home with abuse and lots of religious heaped on top. By all respects, a Christian cult, but a subtle cult. Not the kind that lives on a compound. If you're thinking Mormon family or woman, you've gone too sensational. But it was the kind that told me to wear skirts to my ankle, and the women served best by their mouths shut. A ring on their left hand and a baby inside. The kind of upbringing that made me excellent at carrying stuff. At 12, I carried horse poop for my first job, wheelbarrows full, back and forth from the barn down the road. I carried a sin, my guilt, and my V card, and my sister on my hip. I carried the marks from my mother, my Bible, notebook, and the shame of wanting more. At 15, the weight of it had built enough to cause a crack in the tiny shred of belief I had left for the teachings of the church and my family. It broke me enough to try for something else. So I took an early entry exam to the community college and I passed. Getting in meant I had 2 free years of college. It meant I didn't live at home anymore. It meant I lied about my age to avoid looks from other 18 and 19-year-olds and the occasional returning student. It meant I could learn about things that had been left out of my education, like women's rights and the Trail of Tears. That is so beautifully written.
Thank
And
you.
the line that literally, when I read it for the first time when you posted it, like that like sent just like shivers down my body, is he broke me enough to try something else, which is something that even I feel like I've experienced in my life. Like obviously we've had very different childhoods, but even from my own experience having like immigrant trauma, where you hit a point in your life where it's almost like death by a thousand paper cuts, and little by little, like you said, it was subtle, it was a subtle cult, and little
hmm
by little, and then just eventually it breaks just enough for you to be like, I know I don't have proof that something else is going to work. I know I don't have anybody supporting me. And I know I'm like on my own, but
hmm
maybe, just maybe, something else will work. And I'm willing to try it out.
hmm Yeah.
So, can you kind of go into your background and kind of like how your childhood and the trauma for how were you able to get to a place where you were like, you know what, I think I am worthy of something better, and how you
hmm
kind of escaped that.
Yeah. I think I think it's slowly over time and it's subtle. I am not a headline story where they found me in a basement like Mole Women.
Yes.
Like I am not the person who did it in 6 months or those types of things. Those are very flashy, sexy headlines, and that's not my story. But I think a lot of parts of my story are very relatable to a lot of people who either grew up in abusive homes like I did and or grew up in very religious
Yeah.
constricting conservative homes. And I'm not saying like religion in general. Like, this is a very specific type of religion. I think there's plenty of people who are women of faith, men of faith, humans of faith, who are genuinely good people. So I want to put that out there first so that you don't get a bunch of bad comments on this episode. Okay. Okay. We see you. We know you're there. But there was twofold to this. There was the religious piece, which was like skirts to the ankles, turtlenecks. Women had a place. They were not to be educated. If they were to be educated, it was in very small ways. I was homeschooled. I was very isolated. We lived in the middle of nowhere. My social interactions were with other people who had the same beliefs in order to guard us or guard our hearts. Children were getting married. I say children because, the youngest bride in our church was 16, marrying other people. Like, the whole thing was like getting married, staying a virgin, having babies on your wedding, like getting pregnant on your wedding night. Like, and that was somehow women's pedestal. Like, that is where women belonged. And I tried to want that. Like, I did. I was like, gave it a shot. But there were just so many moments going all the way back that didn't line up for me. Like, a lot of things. Like the women in church who she had bruises on her, and I was just told not to say anything and that we were just praying for them. And so there was all these things being ignored about women, to put them in a specific place and to teach them not to trust themselves. Like, a lot of narratives of like women being stumbling blocks, which is why we dress the way we did, of women being not trustworthy. But if a man says it, it is trustworthy. So these are all planting seeds of doubt in me very young for where I am today. And then that was paired with my mother and my family being like very abusive. And so it was like this very strange pairing of like, we've taken all power away from women, but the one woman who is supposed to love me unconditionally has quite a bit of power over me and is using it in a way that's really traumatic. And so that caused a lot of confusion, I think, for me early on. And I asked a lot of questions, which is when I kind of started realizing like this was not for me. Like,
yeah, it's so funny because as a child, I also asked a lot of questions, and that was also not, no question. A child asking a lot of questions. Oh, no, 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 no.
Yeah. I mean, you've said this before, but I was always too much.
Oh yeah, I was always too much. I was always
Yeah.
put down. My opinion never mattered. I was always put down. Even in like high school, I got told I was like an AP student, and even in high school, I got told that like I should lower my ambitions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, literally, like not a single goddamn person was like, you know what? Maybe you can do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That was not a perspective. Like,
Yeah.
I had a path that I was set on. I didn't want to go on that path at some
Yep.
point, and that didn't set well with many people. So I was
Yep.
too much. I was too loud. I was often my body was attacked because I think that's a form of power that's very easy to wield for anyone. So
Yep.
like, I was too fat. I was too sexy. It was too everything, right? Like, at
Yes.
every point.
You just couldn't win.
You could not win.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the questions that I asked, like, there's a story in the Bible about the guy who goes to kill his son because God tells him to. And,
Yep.
you can Google it if you don't know. But I was like, this doesn't seem right. Like, would you do that? Like, I was asking my father, would you do that? And he's like, I would follow whatever God said. It's God, my wife, then then my children. And so I was like, wow, I guess I really know exactly where I stand, and it's not a priority. And so I think it was a slow journey of figuring out that I needed to make myself the priority because nobody else in my life was going to. And I needed a way out. And I was really interested in education. I taught myself for a lot of my homeschooling part of things, or I was in like co-ops and stuff. So passing that early entrance exam, like you said, was really important for me, to allow me to receive an education, like a full, well-rounded education. I took a women's studies course. And I, of
Wow.
course, I know, this
Scandalous.
was it was scandalous. I did tell my parents, that I was taking this course, and they're like, oh my, they were like horrified. One thing I didn't even know about women's rights, but they were horrified that I was taking it. Like they could not fathom it. And they're like, guard your heart. You need to be so careful. We don't want you to become insert anything. They didn't want me to become
A
a
free
lesbian. They didn't want
thinking.
me to become a
Yes.
liberal. Didn't want me to critically think. Little do they know I am bi and a liberal, and now I critically think for my living. But that's like, I did everything opposite. So yeah. And I think that when I was in an environment that was so constricting, it like forced me to find something else
Yeah.
that worked for me. And it really stemmed from me seeing people being mistreated. Like I saw so many women being mistreated. My I took a lot of mistreatment to protect my younger sisters who are much younger than me, from my parents. And so I just like, I cannot stand that. Like outside
Yeah.
of business, like I am like, if there is an injustice in this world, I am so livid. Like I am like ready
Yeah.
to pick up a torch and like hit the streets. And I think that like helped me make that shift into choosing something else. And once I started to get an education, that is where everything really shifted. And I know that my family knows that well, because they made sure my sisters did not receive quite that or have the opportunity, because they knew that shifted things for me. But I feel really grateful that I was able to make that happen, because then other things started going in place, and I was like, wait, this isn't lining up. I actually don't believe in that, so it was a big deal, that part of things.
Yeah. Something that I see a lot in when women come to me to work with me, and like you don't even have to have like a worst case scenario situation like this, right? Like you could also just grow up in a fine family or like not have any, like major trauma, but still it's like a shocking how many women just have these narratives implanted into their minds at such a young age. I mean, even me, like granted, I didn't have the same home situation you had, but even as an immigrant, like there was just things told to me as, well, this is the way they are because this is who we are. Right. And you just have to kind of accept that. So, like, even for me, when I was like, well, I want to move to New York and I want to go to college, like, literally, my mom was like, that is the worst fucking decision you will ever make in your life. Like, it was literally World War III in my house. And she's like, who do you think you are? Like, who do you think you are? You're going to come home crying. You're not going to be able to last, right? So it's like a lot of the times,
Mm-hmm.
and so how this relates back to like my clients is that they're like, well, I just have I have a limiting fear around X, Y, and Z. And I was like, okay, well, where do you think that stems from? And they're like, well, I remember when I was little, my dad told me that work had to be really hard or you're a failure, right? So
Mm-hmm.
now in their
Mm-hmm.
business, they think they have to work 12 hours and then they reach burnout. And then they're like, but I'm working really hard. I'm like, okay, well, how can we shift that narrative to maybe hard work is emotional. Maybe for you right now, the hard work you need to be doing is like the emotional inner work. That's also hard work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
Mm-hmm.
relearning all these toxic mindsets that now we have to shift into these perspectives of like, okay, but like, what do I want to believe? Like, what is the reality I want
Mm-hmm.
to make for myself? And that is
Mm-hmm.
essentially what you have to do in order if you're going to do anything in life, but especially scale a business.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And I love that you said like that phrase of who do you think you are? Because that is said so many different ways to
Yep.
women. If you're raised religiously, there's a lot of that embedded in like you are not taught to trust yourself. Like you are a
Oh, absolutely
sinner,
not.
you are a stumbling block. Like how you do not listen to yourself, you listen to God and men, and they make decisions for you, because who do you think you are? And
Yep.
like that phrase is just, and sometimes it's in families that aren't religious either. Like there's this idea that we should somehow ascribe to a specific path. And in my case, it was like tied to being righteous and making it to heaven and whatever. But putting a lot of blame on women for other people's actions, to carry that. And so I think that was part of like what I was writing about carrying. Like I was carrying a lot of other people's actions as my own guilt, as my own shame, as my own thing that I had to somehow take care of. And and that manifested into really people pleasing, really
Yep.
overworking, and all of those things, which goes right into business.
Oh,
Like,
100%. Imposter
and
syndrome, fear, like absolutely.
yes, yes. And was I in therapy for years? Yes. Am I back in therapy? Yes. I think everyone should be in therapy and needs therapy. But like that was a big part of things I was working through, is like, I don't need to carry that stuff anymore because it's no longer serving me. I don't need to hear that voice asking me, who do you think you're, like, who are you to do this? Like that is something that needs to be taken out of the narrative that I'm telling myself. And that's something that we've talked about too. Like, the words that you tell yourself,
Yes. They
that changes
matter.
everything. They
Oh,
matter. And
100%.
and some people are like, oh, that's so cliche, or oh, you say mantras. Like, it works. Like, I don't care. I don't care what you have to say. Like, it is,
Yes.
it's shapes your decisions. It shapes like the direction you're going. It shapes what you think of yourself. And so for me in business, for example, the decision to go from freelancer slash gig worker as a side hustle in the early part of my business story to small business owner completely changed everything. Changed how I approached my business, changed who I served. When I went from small business owner to business owner, that changed everything. When I changed from business owner to CEO and agency owner, that changed everything in terms of revenue, the clients I'm bringing in, like the stories that we tell ourselves, the narratives that we're speaking to ourselves, which sometimes are put there by past childhood
Oh,
traumas, like it was
100%.
for me.
Yep.
They change everything. And if you can start to tell yourself a different story, one that's based in truth, then it can actually like shift everything else in your life, both personally and in business.
Yes.
Um, yeah. And there was a lot of that happening for me, but like I said, slowly over time, it took me years to even say that I was not a Christian anymore. It took me years to say that I had abusive parents and confront them about it. Like, those were things that I really had to be like, oh, but I don't want to be the person who went through that. But now I can say I went through that and it made me the person I am today.
Oh, 100%. And I remember this past summer when you came to visit me in New York City, we were talking about something and you said, "Yeah, but I just can't see myself as that. I can't see myself as seven-figure Bethany," or like something along those lines where you were like, "I can't see myself as insert your highest self," whatever that is. And I was like, "Yeah, but like, don't you think that, like, you were based on what I know about your childhood, you were so delusional that you literally created your own reality and you were like, 'Bye. I'm gonna have this whole other life now.'" I was like, "So if you were able to do that as a child, now as a fully grown adult, knowing everything that you know, being liberated and having, critical thinking and like having all these resources now, like why can't you just apply that same like unwavering faith to your business? Because if you did that as a child, then you can 100% be seven-figure Bethany." And I think that was kind of like a light bulb moment for you where like, well, yeah, why can't I?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. The delusion I had to hold, like, I had to believe that women were something else. And if you think about the fact that I was not taught about women or women's rights at all, and except for Bible stories where they're usually a prostitute or in trouble. You know, like, if you think about that and the fact that like I decided one day that I as a woman was going to do something different and be something different, and I didn't agree with that, despite, physical and emotional abuse that I knew would come from that decision.
Yeah.
If I could do that, then I can believe in myself in business. But it comes back to that whole trusting yourself.
Oh,
Like, and that was
100%.
a big part of our work together, is like I
Yes.
had to learn to trust myself in business, which was a skill I didn't work on in therapy. Like, I was just working
Mm,
on,
yeah.
healing and trauma and
Yeah.
trusting myself in general. But trusting myself in a business you have to trust yourself with decisions and investments. And there are all those narratives like, oh, women don't know how to make smart investments. Women are too emotional.
Yep.
You're spending too much, or whatever it might come with it, or like the people pleasing part of it. for a long time meant I had zero boundaries with clients.
Oh, I
And
remember. I remember from the early days of working with you. You had zero, like if it was possible to have less than zero boundaries, like that was you.
yeah, they were like calling and texting me at all hours. I was doing things unpaid all the time because they asked
Mm-hmm.
for it. Sometimes I would forget to send an invoice because I know they had complained about like paying, like things like that, where I'm like, why would I do, like, I would never tell anyone else to do that. I would be like,
Yeah,
absolutely not, you know. But when it came to myself, I was willing to drop that because I didn't have, you know, the tools to put boundaries in place, or that self-trust and the belief that like, if I do put these boundaries in place, it's still going to be okay and people will still respect that, you know, which is super important.
100%. Yeah. And I think like what it really comes down to is like for me, from what I experienced as a child, I had to, as like a survival mechanism, have had like all in unwavering trust in myself in order to get out of my situation and now be in New York. But it's also okay if for you, your unwavering trust was like little by little built up. But the whole point is that we made a decision that our current life was not the life we wanted to live.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a decision we made with no evidence. Like blind faith, this is what I want. I know I don't see it in my current reality. I know I don't have anybody to talk to about it in my current reality. I know nobody even believes me or thinks it's possible for me. And despite all those things, I still want to go ahead and try. And I think if you can apply that into business, that is where you're going to see huge shifts happen. But what I see personally is a lot of people, especially women, they come to me and they're like, yeah, but will somebody actually pay that? Will am I going to be able to actually fill that, program? Like I don't know, I just can't see myself as someone who like is able to even hold that amount of money, right? And at that point, just from like working with so many people, I'm able to sense like, okay, this is something like a lot more deep rooted, but they're not able to have that perspective. So that's when the work of like, okay, let's dive into this. And it's also the reason that in the Limitless Mastermind, we have a monthly mindset meeting with a
Mm-hmm.
mindset coach, because
Mm-hmm.
especially as you're scaling, you need someone there. Like mindset becomes more important than ever at that point. At that point, it's like, how are you holding and embodying that next level version? Because if you can't hold that version of 5K months of yourself, you're not going to be able to hold seven
Exactly.
figure version at
Yes.
like 20K months. It just like, I don't care. You could have literally the best strategy in the world. If that mindset is complete other shit, it's just not going to work.
It's not going to work. And I think that this is such an important conversation to have, because I feel like we as women are the ones who are only ones who are going to have this conversation
Oh,
as women
100%.
CEOs. Like, we're the only ones who are going to be like, yeah, my childhood trauma absolutely affects me because
Like, and
because
I can't even imagine a men being like, oh, by the way, when I was 5, this is what happened to me, but now I'm the CEO of like JP Morgan. Like,
right.
no, that's never going to
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah, like the idea that, you know, you have to consider like, you could actually be afraid, you know, like if you were physically abused like I was, like you could be afraid that you would literally get, you know, hurt
Yeah.
physically if you make a wrong decision, which was my truth. And so that shaped like a lot of decisions. And it's like, oh, if I make this wrong decision, if I mess up, I'm going to be in trouble. But like, by who? Like by myself? Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
really good. I think women tend to be really good at not only holding guilt, but like self-punishing.
Oh, yeah.
Like
I
sometimes
could have
even
done
before
better.
it happens. Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
before it even happens. You're like, "Oh, but I will mess that up, or I could have done better, or I made a bad decision, or I failed at this. Like
Yeah. I
I
see
failed
that a
at my
lot.
first business." You see it a lot because they're holding it as like they're in trouble for that somehow. Um but they shouldn't be. Like, women make just as many mistakes as men, but men aren't there like, "Oh, I'm in trouble. I better like, you know, punish myself in some way." Like, that's not the reaction, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. So when we started originally working together, I remember you were like even hesitant to like book an intensive with me, which is kind of crazy because now like you're in
Yeah.
my mastermind.
Hmm.
But so at what point were you like, okay, I need something, right? Like I need help. I need help from a business point of view. At what point were you like, I know I have all these limiting beliefs, but like, so what made you be like, you know what, I'm gonna go give this a chance, even if it is like an intensive.
Yeah. I think there were two things. I mean, I was like the person who watched you for months before I like actually booked you. That was me.
Yes.
I was the lurker.
Yep.
Um and I needed to build that trust with you
Hmm.
because, and I know this is a story of a lot of your clients too in the past, I had been burned by a group
Oh,
program.
yes. Yes.
I had had not so great experiences with coaches who told me the same thing that they posted on their feed. Like there was no like tailored individual advice that was going to get
Yep.
me to the next level. And then the realization that I wanted to be at the next level. Like where I was wasn't sustainable. Where I was wasn't going to bring me in the revenue I wanted or help me build the business that I wanted.
Yeah.
And all of those things came together to me being like, okay, I think I want to book an intensive, but I was nervous about it because of the investment amount. And then now I look at that and I think like I'm investing, you know, thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars every year in myself and coaching in my business. And I'm seeing that ROI and I'm expecting others to do the same with me. And it
Yep.
had to come to that point of like, if I want people to invest in me and my business, then I have to do the same, you know,
Oh,
another
100%.
in another way that's not in a way that I needed. Like I didn't need a service. I didn't need a website. I needed help in building a business, but also working through those kind of mindset shifts that were impacting my business decisions, which is what you specifically were helping me with. And on top of that, like watching your work, you had a strategy, you had a system, you had like steps that I saw you walk people through. And I don't see that a lot in
Yeah.
the coaching space, very, very rarely. And I didn't see the transformations that you had, like very rarely in other spaces. And I think it's because you had a specific approach and strategy that you would walk people through that changed their business decisions and how they were looking at the business, which incorporated this mindset piece that we're talking about. Because
Yeah.
like again, like I said, like most people skip over that, but it's like if you're not dealing with that, it's not going to just go away. You know, you're wasting money because you're not actually getting to the root of the problem, which is something you do so well.
Yeah, I find that a lot. I mean, if, for anybody who doesn't know, like I have 10 years of corporate marketing background, right? So I'm and I'm a manifesting generator. So I'm like in my masculine 24/7. So I like my brain just naturally works in frameworks, but like the whole part of what I teach is my intentional repeatable scalable framework. And part of that is we make intentional decisions, and so a lot of times what I personally see online that I have like an issue with is it's either like all mindset or all strategy, but like navigating every person has their own situation. So how do we navigate a way that like we're taking intentional action, but that action probably doesn't look like what you think it's going to look like, right? So for example, a lot of people come to me and it's like, oh, I just know I have a pricing issue. Oh, I just know I have a content issue. And I was like, I can tell you 9 out of 10 times you probably don't have a content issue. It's probably something else, but you just like can't see the root of the problem. So we're always trying to get to the root of problem, right? So a lot of the times I'll be like, okay, well, before we work on content, we actually have to work on like 10 other things before then. And they're like, well, no, I just need a content strategy. I'm like, okay, but I'm telling you right now, if you want the results that I'm sharing of my other clients, like you're going to need a lot more than just a content strategy. Like there's so many more steps to that. And it's so when like people come to me and they're like, well, I just want one intensive. I'm like, yeah, sure, we can do one intensive. But like if you on your onboarding form are literally telling me you're like burnt out, you're stuck at 7 to 10K months, or you're stuck at 3K months, or you're having like all these foundational issues, I'm telling you right now, like if you want to fully embrace and embody that next level you in your business that you know that you're worthy of, it's going to take a lot more than just like 30 days of working with someone. And like, look at Bethany. Like, we've literally been working together for 2 years now. And it's why she's been able to scale to multiple six figures. And like next year, we're projecting 500,000 for her, which is like insane given like where you were 2 years ago, where you were like scared to even pitch someone 3K for an
Yeah.
offer.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And now I'm like, God, I can't even imagine, like, because of the value of the work that I provide, I can't even imagine charging less than I do now. But like, I remember that exact conversation with you where I was like, oh, I don't know if people will pay that. And it was
Yeah.
because I didn't know if I personally was worth it.
Mm,
And again, that's
yep.
another thing that I had to separate is like this, one, I'm running a business. They're paying for my brain, my skills, my talent, not like my worthiness. And I can't tie it to that. Um, but that said, like you also have to believe you're worth it. Like you have to
You
know
have
that
to
like
embody it.
you 100% are at that level. And that is what things cost. And that is the direction? So yeah, that was huge for me walking through that with you. And also like, I just have to say, like, if you are an entrepreneur and you are alone, like a solopreneur, like you're starting out, you don't have a
Yep.
team yet, you don't have support, like it is lonely. And you're just like reading, scrolling Instagram, reading posts of like 300K months. And you're like, well, what the fuck's wrong with me?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't know. Like, you're like, I don't know what I should be doing. Oh, is it a content issue? Is it because my content isn't as
Yeah.
flashy because I don't have those
Yeah.
headlines? Like, no, or it follower. No, it's none of that. And like sometimes you just need someone to be like, listen,
Yes.
it's you. Well, we're gonna fix it because what you're doing is incredible. And
You're like,
like,
hi, it's the problem. It's me. I'm the
yeah, it's
problem.
me. I'm the problem. Yes, yes, yes. And like that's I mean, when I originally in the moment, it was hard to say. Like, I don't want to put that out there and be like, it's so easy. Like in the moment, it's hard to say. You have a little bit of pride. You're like, I built
Oh,
this far,
absolutely.
but then like afterwards, I'm like, yeah, it was me. It was me all along. I needed to figure it out. But I also
But
needed someone to be like, you can do this because like we were talking about earlier, our whole lives we've been told, who do you think you are? Well, you can't do that. But having someone in your corner to be like, yes, you can. Your work is super valuable. Look at all of this past experience. Look at how we're shaping you as an authority. Look at how we're going to position you and build trust and change your product suite. Like we did all that together.
yep.
And that's what I needed at that moment for sure.
Yes. 100%. And um when we talk about like being intentional, it's like hold on, I just lost my train of thought. I had something really good to say.
It'll come back.
Ah, what was I gonna say? Wait, what were we just talking about? Oh my god, why did I lose my train of thought? Um, you were talking about something about the mastermind. Oh, I
Oh,
know now.
having people. Yeah.
Yes. Oh, yes. And something that I often see is people will be like, "Well, I have my business friends, or I have or I have people who are really supportive of me, and like that's the community I need." And I'm like, "Yeah, that's great, but like." It's kind of like going to your therapist versus like talking to your friend, right? Like the results you're going to get are night and day, and like it is lonely. And but also like your loved ones, as supportive as they might be, or even your business besties, as supportive as they might be, like they didn't sign up to hold space for your growth, right? Like they have their own stuff going on. Can you vent to them? Absolutely. Can you be like, hey, I'm thinking about this idea? Yeah, great. But is it a design community or design space where the other person is actually accountable for your growth? Probably not, right? Which
Yeah.
is like, which is why, like, when you actually pay to be in a container, regardless if it's one on one or regardless if it is the Limitless Mastermind, like, you are like you are agreeing to all be there for each other in that specific way, and you get what you give. And that's a reason why all of you in the mastermind have seen such amazing ROI in different facets of business, not just monetary, but it's because you're all there with the accountability and saying, hey, I'm here to hold space for you, and I want space given to me as well. And that's the perspective shift of that. That's when the ROI starts coming.
Oh yeah, 100%. On that same note, like with you and you're my client, I'm your client. I've helped you build your brand. But on top of that, we've become super great friends.
Yeah.
But there is not a single point where I am not aware that I would never want to disrespect our friendship or lose our friendship or make you feel like you're carrying a bunch of shit that you don't need to so like navigating that, which I think a lot of people do in the online space, is like,
Oh yeah,
that's why you're in a container. That's why
a
you're
hundred
in
percent.
this place where you can feel so comfortable to ask for that support and be like, I have this client, I need advice, I need a document, I need a new contract, whatever it is. But if I wasn't in that space, because I respect us and our friendship, I wouldn't be like,
Absolutely.
I'm going to text you at midnight and tell you this, and want you to respond. Like that is like energy taking. And if you're
Absolutely.
depleting other people's energy like that and you're not being considerate, you're like not a great friend anymore. And that's
Yeah.
not what your support system is there for. They're there to like cheer you on and be like, absolutely, you're amazing, or vent to, but they are not there to support in the way that a container can, or even like one-to-one coaching like we've done before. Like that's when I'm comfortable to come to you with anything.
Oh,
And I think
absolutely.
everybody needs that in their space, especially as they're building something and don't have a team or a support yet. Or in my case, literally don't have support in my family because we're no contact, obviously
Yeah.
I have like a partner and other people in my life. I'm not totally alone, but that I just throw that out there. um, but yeah, like I think that's so important.
Yeah.
And then at this point, you've had those clients or customers who cross those boundaries, and like you don't want to be that with your friends. So
No.
put yourself
Yeah.
in a place where you're going to have the support you need,
Yeah.
which is what I needed.
I recently did an Instagram post about that. And literally the amount of people that commented and were like, I need to have a conversation with my biz besties because I'm drained. And I'm like, your biz bestie is not, even if they are like a business mentor. I have tons of friends who are business mentor. I don't go to them with my business problems unless I'm just having like a fun rant with them or convo or like, oh,
Yeah,
what's up? But like in no reality am I expecting them to give me solid business advice for growth. Like that
for
is not
free.
what they're for free. That is
Yeah.
not what they're there for. And I just have so much integrity and respect for you and my clients and just everybody that is so near and dear to me that I would never want to cross that line. But like the ROI really does happen when you're in a container where like that is the single objection for that container is like that's what we're doing there. And it's also a place where like even if you have a team, you probably don't feel comfortable being like, hey guys, I'm like having a mental breakdown today, just to let you know, right? Like, you're supposed to be a leader. You're supposed to, be
Mm-hmm.
leading them and just setting a good
Mm-hmm.
example for them. So, like, chances are, you also don't want to go to your team and be like, guys, I don't know what I'm doing. Can you guys help me? Like,
Yeah.
chances are
You don't
you
want to be
don't
like,
want to.
I'm having a mentee bee. Can we like
Yes. No,
talk
it's true.
about?
But in the mastermind, you can be like, you guys, honestly, I need to tell somebody about the mental breakdown I just had because I need some support. And then
Mm-hmm.
we're all like, okay, great. Let's talk about it. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like unless you've had that space where you've been so supported, like it's honestly a game changer.
It is a game changer. Yeah. I mean, at this point, like I don't see a point in my business where I'm not having some type of support. I don't know what that looks like, but it's been pivotal in like so many things, an
Yeah.
outside perspective, a support system, all of that. In shaping my mindset too, like rethinking things, new eyes on what's actually happening. Like that is so valuable. I can't even like describe how valuable it is,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. I was actually talking to somebody recently who's a multi seven figure entrepreneur, and she was saying that earlier this year she took a break. She was in a mastermind and she took a break just because things were going on. And she took a break for 5 months, and she said those 5 months were the worst even revenue wise for her business. Like she didn't even realize how much she needed a support system, and like her company actually took a hit those 5 months. And then she got her booty straight back into a mastermind. Because like so even at 7 figures, it's like you don't just one day be like, I know it all. Okay, so
No.
like you're like stopping being a human, like what?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
so it's so valuable, and especially as you're scaling to 6 figures, it's like something you really need to start investing in.
Yeah.
um yeah.
I was just going to add to that, like we are in a unique situation as online entrepreneurs. But if you think about this in the corporate structure of things, the CEO has an entire team around them
Yeah.
like COO, other people who are direct advisors to their biggest decisions. And then they have their team underneath that. And so it's like we needed to create that structure for ourselves if we were going to
Mm.
build the brands and legacies that we needed. And your mastermind is one of those that does that, because you also bring in the experts. Like I would have never connected with my tax strategist, who now is
Yep.
like one of the best investments I've made all year.
Yep.
Like those kinds of things are what we need to support us to get to the next level and to scale. And I think that's a big difference too between this mastermind and maybe another one, is like, this is not a course. We're not teaching you some skill. You're not building a passive product to go make $100,000 or whatever it is. There's nothing wrong with those groups. This is like your core group of advisors and counselors and those upper people in your company who are going to shape your decisions and overall your revenue and growth.
Yeah. Well, that's the whole reason I created the Limitless Mastermind, because I was thinking, well, when I was scaling to multiple six figures, like what did I need? And I needed a lot more than just one thing. But what I saw is that, like, in order, I had to go like searching far and wide and to create my own expert team to help me. And that was a pain in the ass, let me tell you. Right.
Yeah.
And I was like, why is there not just like a program where if you're scaling to multiple six figures, there's just like a team of experts, and not like guest speakers, actual experts in their field that like most all of them have held like corporate jobs to
Mm-hmm.
actually help you in different roles, right? So like, yes, I'm business and I'm like overall business development, but then we have Hannah, who is PR and branding, right? Helping you with long-term visibility. Then we have Sylvia, who used to work with billionaire families, and she's a financial advisor, right? And then on that note, we were talking about tax strategy, and then we have mindset, then we have copy and positioning, and then we have well-being, right? It's like those were the major expert fields that like got me to multiple six figures, and now is helping you and all the other women get to multiple six figures. But
Mm-hmm.
the conversations we have are a lot more and a lot higher end than just what do I post and how do I get to the next income level, because ultimately, like, if that's what you want to do, like, I'm not the person for you. Yes, will I
Right.
help you get to the next level? Yeah, absolutely. But like, my goal is like, how do we start creating a plan for long-term growth? And I don't mean like the next couple months, I mean like the next 5 to 10 years. Like, we should already be planning how you're going to retire off of this thing that you're building. Like, that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
doing in the mastermind, which is why it's called the Limitless Mastermind, because we're
Yes.
creating limitless potential. So
Mm-hmm.
yes. And then I wanted to ask you, as we're wrapping up, um, given everything you've been through and how successful you are today, looking back, what would you tell childhood Bethany about what you know now?
Oh my gosh. I would tell her a lot of things. I'd
Yes.
write her a novel. Um, I would say, I mean, gosh, there's so many things. I would say you have to start believing in yourself now. I would say that you're not too much. And I would say that you absolutely can and you will. And like, I think hearing those would have gotten me a lot further, a lot sooner.
Same.
Um, but then I also know that like I am resilient and tenacious and like willing to
Yep.
take risks um, because of everything that I went through. But that also means that every time I meet someone who's one of my clients or in my circle, I'm like, yep, you absolutely can do that. Let's do that. Like
Yep.
that's going to happen. And I think that kind of attitude is huge.
Absolutely. And then what is something you no longer value that you used to?
I used to value outside opinions and
My
outside
favorite
thoughts.
topic.
hmm I looked to outside sources for reassurance, which I think a lot of
Mm,
people do in general.
yeah.
Whether that was just like any decision I was making, I looked for outside reassurance that it was the right decision, because I didn't trust myself,
Yep.
because that wasn't a part of how I was taught to be as a human. And I looked to it also to make myself feel better.
Mm,
And if they approved, then I could be perfect. Then I could be ideal. I could be the ideal date. I could be the perfect partner. I could be the best, you know, business owner if other people were like reassuring me about my decisions. And now I just don't value that as much anymore. Do I value the container like we talked about? Yes. Do I value people saying you can do it? Yes, because I do need to hear that sometimes, but it's not to the point where it's like literally if they said it wasn't the case, then I wouldn't do it, which is
Yeah.
where I was at some point, you
Yeah.
know?
And it's like you are who you surround yourself with, right? So like the point of the mastermind is like you're choosing to go into a high caliber space where you're like, I want to hear these perspectives. These are the kinds of women that I want to be in a room with. And so like even me, like I've gotten to the point where like if I don't ask for your opinion, I don't want to hear it. I genuinely do not give a shit. I don't care who you are. You could be like my mother with the best of intentions. I still don't want to hear your opinion.
Exactly.
Like I just really don't, because unless you actually know what I'm doing, like you don't have an opinion and it doesn't matter. So like, but being in a mastermind and saying, hey, I want to hear your perspective, I want to hear from your lived experience, like that perception and willingness to hear that those different opinions, like that's also where change happens.
Yes. Yeah, and those are two totally different
Yes.
things. But that's a big shift in my values of like, I don't care. I don't care what you think. Like,
Yes.
not
A hundred
anymore.
percent.
I did at one point. That shaped a lot of who I was then, but that's not where I am now. And so like on that same note, like what do I value now that I didn't? I value like trusting myself and listening
Yeah.
to my gut. And like I think there's so much like trash out there about that. There's a lot of like judgment directed towards women for like listening to their intuition or their gut, but it's because people are afraid of women's power. It's
Mm-hmm.
because they know that when we do that, we are literally limitless. We are unstoppable when we lean on ourselves and our intuition and our gut. And that is something I really value now because I know that my higher self, my best self is always going to point me in the right direction.
Oh,
And
100%.
that kind of trust I never had before. I was taught to literally not listen to it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Rejection is redirection is like the biggest thing I've learned.
Yeah.
Like just from like all of my experiences that like especially now I'm about to turn 31 and I feel like this year was the first year I truly had like hindsight where I was able to see like, oh, all of those things that I used to have a lot of resentment for and hatred towards, and like, why, of course, that happened to me. Why did that have to happen to me? It was like the first
Mm-hmm.
time where I was like, you know what? I'm not that I'm glad that those things happened, but like I understand why they happened. And I understand that they
Yeah.
were either learning lessons or like I understand like the value they brought to me, to like the woman, the founder, like the friend, the daughter that I am now. And that has been like, that has kept me going and kept me wanting to reach for more and being able to say like I'm worthy of more. I can have more. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care what anybody gives a shit because I know who I am and what I want.
Yes. This actually, so Tony Robbins, which I know he's problematic in some ways. Okay. But let's put that out there. But in the past, I had watched like or heard something from him, from Tony Robbins. And he had said, wow, I'm so grateful. I thanked my mother for the abuse that she put me through. I am so grateful to her. And he has these pictures with her and stuff. And I remember thinking like years ago, like, wow, like that's horrifying. I could never
Yeah.
be in that place. Like, does he have that perspective?
Yeah.
And now I'm like, oh, I have that perspective.
Yeah.
And now things have changed. So it's just sometimes you have to be in the right place to hear it. Cause then I was like,
Yes.
that's not me. And then, 3 years later of therapy, and I was like, oh, that's me now.
Yes. Well, just about like even when I found out about your story, I was like, this is so powerful. How do you feel comfortable sharing it? And I remembered like this was probably like last summer where you were like a year ago, you're like absolutely not. Right? Because
Yeah.
you weren't at the place where you felt comfortable and strong enough sharing this experience. But now through everything you've gone through up until this point and the work we've done now recently, like when we were having that conversation in the mastermind about like do you feel comfortable sharing your founder story, you were like, yes, I feel like I'm finally in the headspace where I feel strong enough to share my message and I want
Mm,
to share my message, and that was a huge
yes.
shift.
Yeah, because I stopped placing that value on what other people were going to think of it. And I had
Yeah.
still been holding on to that shred of it when it came to my story. Because I was like, I don't want people to pity me. I don't want people
Yeah.
to focus on the abuse part or focus on the religion part. So I was like trying to control what people were going to react to. But then I was like, you know what? This is a really powerful story, and parts of it can really be relatable for a lot of people in their business journey and their personal journey.
Yeah.
And so I reached a point where I let go of that value I was placing on what other people were going to interpret, and it changed things.
Yeah. Yeah. Like as long as you follow your intuition and you
Mm.
decide that you are going to be limitless, like you will be. It's as
Hmm.
simple as that. Well, thank you so much. This has
Yes.
been such an incredible story. For everybody listening, if you resonate with this, let us know what you think. Bethany, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, so my website is bethanyworks.com. That's my strategic design studio. I'm really active on Instagram, and my handle is Bethany Works Design. So you can definitely check that out. And in the far future, there will be a podcast. So follow me
Yes.
on Instagram to stay tuned for that.
Yes, and we'll be actually recording another podcast together called Building an Unbreakable Brand, the story behind how Bethany created my brand, and sharing like what does a unbreakable brand that's iconic look like. So thank you so much, Bethany.
Thank you. I appreciate you letting me share and tell my story.
Yes.